What if some questions were never meant to be answered? Across the world, beneath layers of time and silence, lie mysteries so strange, so profound, that no discovery has ever explained them. A city that sank beneath the sea, a book written in a language no one understands, entire communities that vanished without a trace. These are not stories from novels or dreams. These are real events, recorded in history, and still they defy understanding. We live in an age of reason. Satellites orbit overhead. Science unlocks the secrets of life, and answers are only ever a search away. And yet, these mysteries endure, untouched by time, unsolved by knowledge. They whisper from the past, not with facts, but with questions. Could Atlantis have existed? Who wrote the Voynich Manuscript? What drove dozens to dance themselves to death in the streets of Strasbourg? Tonight, you are invited to drift into that silence, not to find answers, but to feel the wonder that questions can bring. In this gentle journey through the greatest mysteries in history, we'll explore the strange and the sublime. From vanished colonies to desert lines only visible from the sky, from icy deaths on Russian slopes to the glowing splendor of a room that disappeared without a trace. Let these stories unfold like pages in a book no one can fully read. There is no need to solve them. Just listen, just imagine, just wonder. Because sometimes the most beautiful part of the story is not knowing how it ends. This is Drift Off to History, where we bring calm stories for curious minds. Beneath the crashing waves of the Atlantic, they say, lies a city of unimaginable splendor. Its towers gleamed with gold and orichalcum. Its streets were wide and ordered, and its people lived in harmony with nature and one another. This was Atlantis, a realm of power, wisdom, and mystery. And one day, it vanished. The story begins not in a legend or a folk tale, but in philosophy. Around 360 BCE, the Greek thinker Plato described Atlantis in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. He spoke of an advanced civilization that had existed 9,000 years before his own time. A mighty naval power beyond the Pillars of Heracles, in the great ocean that borders the known world. According to Plato, the Atlanteans grew proud, defied the gods, and were punished by a single catastrophic event. In a single day and night, he wrote, the entire island sank into the sea. At first glance, it seems like an allegory, a cautionary tale about hubris, much like the myths of Icarus or Prometheus. Plato himself may have meant it that way, yet, as the centuries rolled by, people began to wonder, what if Atlantis was real? The allure of Atlantis has endured for over 2 millennia, and with good reason. It's a story that ignites the imagination. Could there have once been a civilization more advanced than any other of its time? One with knowledge lost to history, swallowed not by time but by water. Theories abound. Some believe that Atlantis was based on the Minoan civilization, a sophisticated Bronze Age culture that thrived on the island of Crete and the nearby island of Thera, now called Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption devastated Thera, triggering tsunamis and causing widespread destruction. It was a disaster of such scale and suddenness that it may well have inspired Plato's tale, passed down through generations, growing more fantastical with each retelling. Others point to locations farther afield. The Azores, an archipelago in the mid-Atlantic, have been proposed as remnants of a submerged continent. Some claim the lost city lies in the Caribbean, near Bimini Road, a submerged rock formation off the coast of the Bahamas that some believe is a man-made structure, perhaps a roadway or seawall. There are even those who place Atlantis beneath the sands of the Sahara, suggesting that it was never an island at all, but rather a great inland kingdom lost to the desert winds. Yet no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced. No ruins, no writing, no artifacts to confirm Atlantis existed as more than a myth. And still, the search continues. Submarines explore the ocean floor. Satellites scan beneath the waves. Adventurers and scholars alike follow breadcrumbs of possibility across the globe. But perhaps the beauty of Atlantis lies not in its discovery, but in its mystery. It exists in the space between fact and fiction, a mirror reflecting our deepest questions. Could humanity have risen before, only to fall again? Are there entire chapters of our history missing, waiting patiently beneath the sea? As we imagine the marble halls and sunlit harbours of this legendary realm, we feel the pull of something older than history and deeper than memory. Atlantis may be myth, or it may be memory disguised as myth, but either way, it reminds us that not everything can be known, and not everything should be. So, let the waves roll gently over its sunken spires. Let the silence speak where words no longer reach. And as we leave the realm of Atlantis behind, we carry with us the echo of its mystery. Still unsolved, still submerged, still calling. The year was 1587. Across the vast Atlantic Ocean, a small group of English settlers arrived on the shores of Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. They came with hope, with ambition, and with dreams of building a new life in an untamed land. It was the first attempt at a permanent English settlement in the New World. But when help finally returned 3 years later, the colony was gone. No bodies, no battle, no signs of struggle, just empty houses, dismantled fortifications, and a single word carved into a tree, Croatoan. It remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. The story begins under the patronage of Sir Walter Raleigh, who had received a charter from Queen Elizabeth I to establish a colony in North America. The venture was both a matter of pride and of promise, a foothold for England in a land rich with resources. Led by John White, the settlers included not just soldiers and explorers, but families. White's own daughter, Eleanor Dare, gave birth to the first English child born in the Americas, Virginia Dare, shortly after their arrival. But as supplies dwindled and tensions with local tribes grew, it became clear that the colony would not survive without help from home. So White sailed back to England to gather supplies, but his return was delayed by war. England had entered into conflict with Spain, and all available ships were conscripted to defend the homeland. By the time White made it back to Roanoke in 1590, 3 years had passed. What he found was not a scene of death, but of absence. The settlement was deserted. The houses had been taken apart, not destroyed. There were no graves, no blood, no remains. Only the letters CRO carved into a tree and the word Croatoan etched into a post of the fort. It was a word familiar to White, the name of a nearby island and the people who lived there. He had instructed the colonists, should they ever need to move, to leave a sign. If they were forced, they were to carve a Maltese cross alongside the message. But no such mark was found. It seemed they had left willingly. White wished to search Croatoan Island, but a storm approached. His crew refused to stay. They left Roanoke behind, and he never saw his family again. In the centuries since, speculation has grown like ivy over a forgotten ruin. Did the colonists assimilate with local tribes, living on in language and lineage? Some Native American groups later reported ancestors with European features. Did they starve or perish in the wilds? Or did something darker happen? A massacre, perhaps, or an attempt to sail home that ended in tragedy? More recently, archaeological digs have uncovered faint clues, fragments of English pottery on nearby Hatteras Island, signs of cultural blending. DNA projects aim to trace descendants, but there is no definitive answer. This word Croatoan itself has become a symbol, not of terror, but of the unknowable. Edgar Allan Poe reportedly uttered it just before his mysterious death. It has appeared in books, films, and whispered legends, a single word carved in wood that echoes across time. Perhaps they lived, perhaps they thrived, or perhaps they simply disappeared, becoming part of the land they once tried to tame. And so the wind moves through the trees of Roanoke, stirring leaves that cover old foundations. The sea laps gently against the shore, where ships once brought hope and returned to silence. There is no scream, no signal, no ending. Only the word, only the mystery, Croatoan. In a quiet library at Yale University, locked within a climate-controlled vault, there rests a book unlike any other. Its pages are filled with strange curling script that no one has ever been able to read. Scattered throughout are illustrations of unknown plants, celestial diagrams, and human figures bathing in curious green pools. The ink has not faded, the pages have not torn, and yet, for over 600 years, no mind, human or machine, has unlocked its secrets. It is called the Voynich Manuscript, and it may be the most mysterious book in the world. Discovered in 1912 by a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich, the manuscript quickly captured the attention of scholars, linguists, cryptographers, and dreamers. Voynich claimed to have found it in a Jesuit college in Italy, but its true origin remains elusive. Radiocarbon dating has placed the parchment to the early 1400s, but beyond that, the story is shrouded in shadow. What makes the manuscript so extraordinary is that it appears to be written in a language that doesn't exist. The letters are beautiful and deliberate, flowing, consistent, seemingly purposeful. Yet the alphabet resembles no known system. It's not Latin, Greek, Arabic, or Hebrew, nor is it a cipher that has ever been cracked. Despite decades of effort by the brightest codebreakers, including those who decrypted Nazi communications in World War II, the Voynich manuscript has resisted every attempt at translation. Its illustrations only deepen the puzzle. There are botanical drawings of plants that cannot be found in any earthly flora. Some appear to be hybrids, a flower from one species grafted onto the leaves of another. In other sections, the margins burst with swirling astrological charts, complete with stars and zodiac signs, but arranged in unfamiliar patterns. And then there are the women. In many pages, naked female figures populate circular pools, sometimes linked by elaborate plumbing systems, or immersed in what appear to be medicinal baths. They hold stars, wear crowns, or float beneath arches. Are these allegorical depictions, rituals, medical procedures, dreams? Some believe the manuscript is a book of knowledge, a medieval encyclopedia of medicine, astronomy, or herbology, written in a forgotten or invented tongue. Others suggest it's a hoax, a deliberate creation meant to puzzle or deceive. But if so, it is a masterwork of deception, containing hundreds of consistent, complex pages with statistical patterns resembling real languages. There are even those who claim it may not be from our world at all, that it could be the journal of an alien observer, or the diary of someone touched by visions no one else could see. Fiction, perhaps, or prophecy. Modern artificial intelligence has tried to decode it, feeding the text into complex algorithms and comparing it to known languages, but the results remain inconclusive. Some claim to find faint traces of Latin or Proto-Romance roots. Others suggest it may be a written version of a lost spoken language, or a constructed one, born of a mind no longer here to explain it. And yet, the book feels purposeful. It feels real. There's something almost tender about it. The careful strokes of ink, the neat organization of sections, the delicate drawings colored by hand. Whoever created it, whether sage or charlatan, cared deeply about this strange little volume. It was not tossed together in haste. It was crafted with devotion. The Voynich Manuscript sits today in the Beinecker Rare Book Library, watched over by curators and studied by hopeful minds from around the world. Anyone may request a scan of its pages. Anyone may try to crack its code. But the manuscript is silent, it waits, and it keeps its secrets close. Perhaps one day, a single word will be understood, a name, a date, a phrase that opens the door to all the rest. Or perhaps, like music without lyrics, its beauty lies in what it withholds. So we turn its pages in our minds, letting the symbols swirl gently through our thoughts. We imagine the scent of the parchment, the quiet scratch of the quill, the soft lamplight flickering over ancient dreams. What knowledge lies within, we may never know, and yet, in the silence of its pages, the mystery lingers, gentle, untouchable, and endlessly awake. It began with a single woman, in the sweltering summer of 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire. A woman stepped into the street and began to dance. She swayed, twirled, and stamped her feet, not to music and not in joy, but with a strange frantic rhythm, and she would not stop. Her name may have been Frau Trophea, and within days she was no longer alone. One by one, others joined her. Dozens of people, men and women alike, taken by an invisible force, began to dance uncontrollably in the heat of the sun. They danced through the streets, their bodies trembling and soaked with sweat, unable to rest, unable to eat. There was no laughter, no celebration. This was not a festival. This was something else entirely, an affliction, a compulsion, a mystery. By the end of the month, over 400 people were said to be caught in the grip of this strange phenomenon. And then, they began to die. Exhaustion, heart failure, strokes. Their bodies, pushed beyond endurance, began to falter, yet the dancing continued. Even when the music was silent, even when the pain must have been unbearable, authorities were bewildered. At first, they believed the only solution was to let it play itself out. Musicians were hired to accompany the dancers, and a stage was built to give them space. But the symptoms worsened, and so the city reversed course. The music stopped. The dancers were gathered and taken to a shrine high in the Vosges Mountains, a place of spiritual healing. There, some recovered. Others were never seen again. What could have caused such a bizarre and tragic event? Some modern scholars suggest mass psychogenic illness, a kind of collective hysteria brought on by extreme stress. Strasbourg at the time was gripped by hardship. Famine, disease, and deep spiritual anxiety weighed heavily on its people. In such conditions, minds can fracture in unison, creating shared delusions or unconscious behaviors. The dancing plague, they argue, was not a physical illness, but a psychological release, a cry for help that spread like wildfire. Others point to ergot poisoning, caused by a toxic mold that can grow on rye. Consuming infected grain can induce hallucinations, seizures, and convulsions, similar to the symptoms of the afflicted dancers. It's a chilling possibility that a simple fungus, born of damp and decay, could have stirred a whole city into chaos. Then there are those who see something deeper, something spiritual, or even supernatural. Some believe the dancing plague was a form of religious ecstasy, an involuntary pilgrimage of the body. The people of Strasbourg lived in a world where saints, miracles, and curses were very real. Could they have been caught in a trance-like state driven by faith or fear? Or was it something darker, a possession, a curse, a punishment for hidden sins? Whatever the cause, the dancing plague eventually passed. The music stopped, the streets grew still, and the city moved on, as cities must. But the questions remain, lingering like the echo of distant drums. No other incident in history matches the scale and persistence of Strasbourg's dancing outbreak, though smaller episodes were reported elsewhere in Europe, and always the same haunting image returns, people dancing not with joy, but with agony, as if the body knew something the mind could not understand. It is easy to think of the past as simpler, less complicated, less strange. But history is full of moments that defy explanation, where the boundary between body and soul, between reality and belief, becomes blurred. And so we imagine the hot cobbled streets of Strasbourg, the fluttering of skirts, the stomp of bare feet, the eyes wide and unblinking. We imagine the quiet panic of neighbors watching loved ones spiral into motion, unable to intervene. We hear no music, but we feel the rhythm, steady, unstoppable, mysterious. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the dance is over, the spell breaks, silence returns. But somewhere in the deep recesses of time, the memory of that strange rhythm remains. And when we listen closely in the quiet of night, we might still hear the faint echo of footsteps, dancing for no reason at all. In the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Ural Mountains, where snow falls like ash and the wind howls through pine and stone, 9 young hikers set out on an expedition that would end in silence, fear, and unanswerable questions. What happened to them one night in February of 1959 remains one of the most haunting and perplexing mysteries of the modern age. It is known simply as the Dyatlov Pass incident. The group, all experienced mountaineers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. They had planned a challenging winter trek to Otor-10, a remote peak whose name in the language of the local Mansi people ominously translates to "don't go there." They never made it. When the team failed to return as expected, search parties were dispatched. What they found stunned investigators and still stirs unease decades later. The hiker's tent was discovered on a snow-covered slope, high on the side of Kholat Syakhl, Mountain of the Dead. It had been slashed open from the inside. Scattered footprints led down the slope, barefoot, some only in socks, others in a single shoe, vanishing into the forest below. There, beneath a tree, the bodies of 2 men were found. They were barefoot, dressed only in their underwear. A fire had been lit nearby, its embers cold. The branches above were broken, suggesting someone had tried to climb or escape. Soon, more bodies were discovered, spaced out along the slope, as if they had tried to return to the tent. Some showed signs of hypothermia, others of blunt trauma. But it was the last 4 hikers, found 2 months later in a ravine, that deepened the mystery. 1 had a fractured skull, 2 had broken ribs, not from falling, but from an unknown force. 1 woman was missing her tongue and eyes. Yet there were no external wounds consistent with violence. Their clothing was radioactive. And the final eerie detail, some of their clothes had been taken from the dead, perhaps in desperation against the cold. What could have caused 9 seasoned hikers to flee their shelter in the dead of night, in sub-zero temperatures, without proper clothing? Why tear open the tent from within? What force drove them into the darkness? Speculation has swirled ever since. One theory suggests a sudden avalanche, that the group, hearing rumbling snow, panicked and fled, but the slope was shallow and no clear evidence of an avalanche was found. Another posits infrasound, low-frequency vibrations caused by wind passing over the mountains. Some believe this may induce panic, nausea, and disorientation, triggering an irrational flight response. Still others propose a secret military accident. The region was used for weapons testing, and some suggest the hikers witnessed something they were not meant to see. The radioactive clothing, the trauma, the hurried evacuation, all might hint at a classified disaster. There are stranger theories too. UFOs, Yeti, paranormal forces. Some believe the hikers encountered something otherworldly, something beyond human understanding. These ideas are often dismissed, yet they persist, as mysteries do, when no clear answers are offered. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation. The official conclusion: an avalanche triggered by a rare slab shift. But many remain unconvinced. The physics of such an event, they argue, don't align with the scene, and so the questions remain, frozen like the mountain itself. We imagine the cold air stinging their faces, the sky a curtain of stars above the snow. We picture them inside the tent, a sudden sound, a moment of fear, a decision to flee that none would survive. Were they hunted? Were they terrified? Or was it the cold itself that confused and unmade them? In the decades since, Dyatlov Pass has become a place of pilgrimage, not just for hikers, but for seekers of truth. A memorial stone bears their names. Flowers are laid in the snow, and at night the wind still whispers through the trees, across the pass, and over the graves of 9 lives lost to something we cannot explain. Whatever happened on that icy slope, it left no survivors, only footprints, broken bodies, and a silence that has never been broken. In the gaslit alleys of Victorian London, where the fog curled low and footsteps echoed like whispers, a phantom stalked the night. He killed with precision, vanished without trace, and signed his letters, if they were truly his, with a name that would never be forgotten: Jack the Ripper. To this day, he remains one of the most infamous and elusive figures in criminal history. A killer whose true identity has never been proven, and whose story continues to stir both fascination and unease more than a century later. It began in the late summer of 1888 in the Whitechapel district of London, a place of poverty, overcrowding, and despair. The victims were women, all of them vulnerable, many of them living on the margins of society. The murders were brutal, methodical, and unlike anything the police had seen before. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Their names are known, their stories tragic, but the man who took their lives, he remains a ghost. He struck swiftly and silently, often in the small hours before dawn. His crimes were marked by gruesome mutilations, and in some cases, surgical precision, fueling theories that he may have been a doctor or butcher. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found in her own room, her body so savagely disfigured that even hardened investigators struggled to describe the scene. Panic gripped the city. Newspaper headlines blared with speculation. Crowds gathered at murder sites, desperate for answers. And then came the letters. Some were hoaxes, likely written by pranksters or opportunists, but a few stood out. One, addressed "Dear Boss," signed off with a chilling nickname, Jack the Ripper. Another, known as the "From Hell" letter, arrived with a piece of a human kidney, possibly removed from one of the victims. Whether the letters were truly written by the killer remains a point of debate, but the name stuck. Jack the Ripper had entered legend. The police, overwhelmed and unequipped, launched an investigation that was vast and chaotic. They interviewed hundreds, arrested dozens, and compiled detailed dossiers. But the killer slipped through their fingers like smoke. Over the years, theories multiplied. Suspects included Montague Druitt, a barrister and teacher who died by suicide shortly after the final murder. Others pointed to Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant who was later institutionalized. Some believed the killer was Sir William Gull, Queen Victoria's physician, tied into a grand conspiracy involving the royal family. Even famed author Lewis Carroll has been suggested, among dozens of unlikely names. Modern DNA analysis has brought some closer to answers. A controversial study claimed to link Kosminski to a shawl found at one of the crime scenes, but many experts question the chain of evidence and the scientific rigor of the test. In the end, the proof remains tantalizing, but inconclusive. So why does the mystery endure? Partly, it is the setting. Victorian London, with its narrow lanes, flickering lamps, and swirling mist, feels like the perfect stage for a ghost story. But more than that, it is the nature of the killer himself. Jack the Ripper wasn't a man with a face or a motive we could understand. He was, and is, an absence, a blank space in the middle of a terrible puzzle. His killings stopped as suddenly as they began. No one knows why. Perhaps he died, perhaps he was imprisoned for another crime, or perhaps he simply chose to stop. There's a strange quietness to it all now, a silence that lingers like fog over cobblestones. Tourists still walk the routes he once stalked, listening to tales spun by guides in top hats. The names of the victims are etched into plaques and remembered by historians. But the man himself has dissolved into myth. We may never know who Jack the Ripper truly was, but in the end, perhaps what haunts us most is not the horror of his crimes, but the chilling possibility that evil can wear any face, or none at all. So let us walk away from Whitechapel now into the pale dawn. Let the lanterns flicker out, let the footsteps fade. The fog lifts, but the mystery remains. And somewhere, far beyond the veil of certainty, a shadow slips silently back into the night. Amid the sands of the Egyptian desert, beneath a sky that burns gold by day and glows with stars by night, rise the pyramids, eternal sentinels of stone. Of these, the Great Pyramid of Giza stands supreme, towering nearly 150 meters, composed of over 2 million limestone blocks. It has endured for more than 4,000 years. It is not just a monument. It is a riddle carved into the earth. For centuries, people have wondered, how did they build it? Theories abound. Some are grounded in engineering, others in speculation. But the truth remains elusive, layered beneath centuries of sand and silence. Built around 2560 BCE for Pharaoh Khufu, the Great Pyramid was part of a vast complex that included temples, causeways, and smaller pyramids. It was originally encased in polished white limestone that would have gleamed in the sun like a beacon. Its alignment with the cardinal directions is nearly perfect, more precise, in fact, than most modern buildings. Its base is astonishingly level. Its sides angle up at 51 degrees, a slope chosen with such intent that it continues to spark debate among architects and historians. But it is not just the scale of the pyramid that fascinates, it is the mystery of its creation. How were such immense stones, some weighing over 70 tons, transported and lifted without cranes, wheels, or steel tools? Theories suggest a variety of methods. Ramps made of mud brick and limestone chippings may have spiraled around the structure or extended outward in straight lines. Sledges pulled across wetted sand could have reduced friction. Teams of workers, perhaps thousands strong, toiled in unison with ropes, pulleys, and immense determination. And yet, no definitive evidence of these ramps has been found. The logistics remain staggering. The speed of construction, estimated at about 20 years, would have required placing one block every 2 minutes of every working day. What makes it more curious is the absence of certain things. No detailed records from the time describe exactly how the pyramid was built. No blueprints have surfaced, no technical plans, only fragments of graffiti and later inscriptions. It is as if the knowledge was considered sacred, to be passed down by word, not written word. For centuries, Western historians assumed the pyramids were built by slaves, but modern archaeology paints a different picture. Workers were likely skilled laborers, fed well, and housed in nearby villages. Bones show signs of hard labor, but also of healed injuries, suggesting care and respect, not cruelty. Still, the mysteries multiply. The interior of the Great Pyramid contains 3 chambers, connected by narrow shafts, that some believe may have had astronomical or ritual significance. The Grand Gallery, with its soaring corbelled ceiling, leads to the King's Chamber, a space of such precision and balance that even the slightest echo feels meaningful, and above it, hidden voids whose purpose remains unknown. Then there are the alternative theories, more speculative, more fantastical. Some propose that lost technologies or forgotten sciences were used. Others speak of ancient advanced civilizations, or even extraterrestrial intervention. These ideas are not supported by mainstream archaeology, yet they persist because the pyramid invites wonder. Its very presence seems impossible. It challenges what we think we know about ancient people, about their skills, their beliefs, and their dreams. And maybe that is the pyramid's true power, not as a tomb, but as a question carved in stone. To stand at its base is to feel time press in around you. To run your hand along its weathered blocks is to touch the edge of something eternal. It has watched empires rise and fall. It has seen gods worshipped and forgotten, and still it stands, unmoved, enduring, as if waiting. Perhaps that is why it draws us still, not just as a monument to the dead, but as a voice from the deep past, calling softly through the silence. Look what we built, look what we knew, and see how much you have yet to understand. So let the desert wind sweep gently across the stones. Let the stars wheel overhead. The pyramid remains, still silent and magnificent. Not just a tomb, but a riddle. In the arid plains of southern Peru, beneath a sky that burns bright by day and gleams with stars by night, there lies a vast and silent canvas. Across the dry, reddish earth stretch thousands of lines, curves, and geometric shapes, some so large they can only be seen in full from the sky. They are known as the Nazca Lines, etched into the desert floor more than 1,500 years ago by the ancient Nazca culture. These geoglyphs include straight lines stretching for kilometers, as well as sprawling figures: a spider, a monkey, a hummingbird, a whale, a tree, and human-like beings with strange, staring eyes. Some are abstract, some are elegant, all are enigmatic. To create these designs, the Nazca people removed the reddish pebbles that coat the desert, revealing the lighter earth beneath. The region's dry, windless climate has preserved them ever since, as if the desert itself chose to protect the message. But what is the message? Why were they made? That is the heart of the mystery. Some scholars believe the lines were part of an astronomical calendar, aligning with solstices or tracking celestial movements. Indeed, certain lines appear to point towards sunrise or sunset on key dates. Perhaps the Nazca were mapping the heavens, or seeking to communicate with them. Others see the lines as part of a religious ritual, paths walked by priests in ceremonies meant to summon rain, fertility, or favor from the gods. In a land where water was scarce and life clung to every drop, perhaps these figures were offerings, sacred symbols carved not in stone, but in silence. Another theory suggests they were linked to water sources, with lines tracing underground aquifers or connecting key ceremonial sites. Still others see them as mythological maps or pilgrimage routes, guiding the faithful across the desert towards something sacred. And then, there are the more fantastic ideas. Some believe the figures were created as messages to beings from the sky, extraterrestrials, perhaps, who would only see the shapes from above. This idea, made popular in the 20th century, is not supported by archaeology, but it has captured the public imagination. The sheer scale of the designs, some hundreds of meters wide, and the fact that they cannot be properly seen from the ground, seems to whisper of something beyond everyday understanding. Yet no advanced tools were used, no flying machines, no lasers, just hands, eyes, ropes, and stakes, and a deep, patient vision of the land. Perhaps what is most moving about the Nazca Lines is that they were made by people who never saw them in their entirety. They could only walk them, mark them, trace their outlines. They created something vast and beautiful, not for their own eyes, but for the sky, or the gods, or for a future they would never know. And maybe that is the point. To stand near them is to feel the immensity of time. The desert is quiet, but not empty. It holds stories beneath its surface, drawn by hands long turned to dust, speaking in a language of shape and silence. We may never know what the Nazca were trying to say, but in the stillness of the plain, as the wind moves gently over the lines, we feel something ancient stirring, a message not to be read, but to be felt. Let the shapes remain, let the mystery endure. In the quiet countryside of medieval England, in a village nestled among the green fields and hedgerows of Suffolk, a most unusual tale began to circulate. It was the 12th century, and Woolpit was a simple place, named, as legend has it, for the deep pits dug to trap wolves. But it is remembered today not for wolves, but for two strange visitors who, one day, appeared from nowhere. They were children, a boy and a girl, and their skin was green. They spoke no recognizable language. Their clothes were made of unfamiliar material. Their eyes, it was said, held a distant, bewildered look, as if they had wandered in from a dream. Farmers found them near one of the wolf pits, confused and frightened. Taken in by a local landowner, Sir Richard de Calne, the children refused all food for days, surviving only on raw green beans. Slowly, their health returned. Over time, their skin lost its greenish hue, and the girl, the boy having died soon after, began to learn English. And then she began to speak. She said they came from a place called Saint Martin's Land, where everything was green, the people, the animals, even the sky. They had lived in perpetual twilight. One day, she and her brother had followed the sound of bells into a cavern or tunnel and emerged into the blinding sunlight of this world. It is a story that sounds like legend, yet it appears in more than one historical account, including writings by chroniclers William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall. Both recorded the tale decades after it was said to occur, based on oral testimony from those who lived nearby. It is wrapped in mystery, but it is not dismissed outright. So what might explain it? Some suggest the children were Flemish refugees, orphaned by war and hiding in the forest. The green hue, perhaps, was a symptom of malnutrition, a condition known as chlorosis, caused by poor diet and iron deficiency. Their strange speech may have been a Flemish dialect unfamiliar to the local villagers. Their story of a green world could have been shaped by confusion, trauma, and the poetic flourishes of time. Others argue the tale is allegorical, a medieval fable, perhaps, meant to teach lessons about charity, difference, or the thin veil between the known and the unknown. The green children may represent outsiders, lost souls, or the mysterious nature of life and death. And then there are more speculative ideas. Some wonder if the children came from another dimension, slipping through a crack in the world, drawn by the sound of church bells, their green skin, their strange world of twilight. It paints a picture not of illness, but of otherness, a fleeting crossing between realms. Or perhaps they were elemental beings, part of ancient English folklore, children of the earth, lost in the human world, fading slowly into myth. The girl, according to legend, grew up and lived a normal life. She was baptized, learned the ways of her new home, and eventually married a man from King's Lynn. But one wonders what memories stayed with her, what dreams she carried of a land where the sky never knew the sun. The fields of Woolpit are quiet now. Sheep graze where the children once wandered. The pits have long since filled in, and the village rests beneath the rolling clouds of time. But the tale remains, not in stone or scripture, but in the hush of old stories, in the green of the leaves, in the soft footfalls of a child lost and found, a story without certainty, a riddle without an answer. And in that mystery, something tender survives, a glimpse, perhaps, of how vast and strange this world, and all its possible others, might truly be. Imagine a room where the walls shimmer like honey under candlelight, where gold and mirrors reflect an amber glow so rich and deep it seems almost alive, where every inch is carved with the delicate artistry of a bygone era. This was the Amber Room, a chamber so breathtaking, so opulent, that it was once hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. And then it vanished. The Amber Room was originally crafted in the early 18th century by German artisans in Prussia, using over 6 tons of the fossilized resin known as amber, interlaced with gold leaf and mirrors. Its panels, warm and translucent, were intricately carved and assembled with exquisite precision. In 1716, it was gifted by the King of Prussia to Peter the Great of Russia, a gesture of diplomacy and friendship. The room was then installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, where it was expanded and admired for over 200 years. Visitors who stepped inside described it not as a room, but as an experience, glowing with the golden light of ages, rich with symbolism and splendor. It was not just a symbol of wealth, but of cultural pride, a masterpiece of craftsmanship and history. And then came World War II. In 1941, as Nazi forces invaded the Soviet Union, curators at the Catherine Palace tried to dismantle and hide the Amber Room. But the fragile panels proved too delicate to move quickly. With little time, they were left behind, covered hastily with wallpaper in the hope of disguising them. It didn't work. German soldiers found the room, dismantled it piece by piece, and transported it to Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, where it was reassembled in the city's castle museum. There, it was put on display, briefly, before being hidden again as the tides of war turned. Then, it was gone. When Soviet forces captured Königsberg in 1945, the Amber Room had vanished. The castle was damaged by bombing, then later demolished by the Soviets. No trace of the panels was ever officially found. The glowing walls of amber, once admired by kings and tsars, had melted into legend. What happened? Some believe the room was destroyed during the Allied bombing of Königsberg, burned to ash, lost forever. Others suggest it was packed into crates and hidden in underground bunkers, mine shafts, or aboard ships sunk in the Baltic Sea. There have been rumors, fleeting sightings, whispered hints, even false panels and forgeries, but no confirmed discovery. Expeditions have searched lakes, tunnels, and ruins. In the 1990s, a single mosaic panel believed to be part of the original Amber Room surfaced in Germany. It now rests in the Catherine Palace, a glowing fragment of what once was. Still, the rest of the room has never been found. In the early 2000s, Russia completed a full reconstruction of the Amber Room based on original designs and photographs. It stands today in the Catherine Palace once more, a breathtaking replica, painstakingly built by modern craftsmen over decades. But the original remains a ghost, lingering in the shadows of history. It is a mystery with no clear answer. Perhaps it lies beneath the earth, preserved in silence. Perhaps it is scattered, its pieces hidden in private collections or buried in sunken ships. Or perhaps it was consumed by fire, never to be seen again. But when we think of it, we do not see ruins. We see that glow, warm, golden, endless. A room not made of stone or wood, but of light itself. And maybe that is the beauty of it, that something so radiant could vanish without a trace, like the last flicker of flame in a room gone dark. The further back we look, the more the world begins to blur, not into darkness, but into dream. The faces become shadows, the voices echoes, and in that quiet distance mystery takes root like wild ivy, curling through time, refusing to be pinned down or swept away. We have wandered through forgotten cities and stared at stars etched into stone. We have listened to the strange silence of a vanished colony, puzzled over an unbreakable book, and watched as dancers moved to a music no one else could hear. We've stood beside icy tents, golden pyramids, and carved lines that stretch into the sky. And in each tale, one thread remains constant. We do not know. There is a quiet power in that. In a world that often demands certainty, where answers are mapped and measured, and everything must fit neatly into place, mystery invites us to pause, to wonder, to accept that not everything can be known, and not every story can be solved. Some mysteries are lost in war, others in the earth, some in the frailty of memory, and some may never have been real in the way we think of real, yet they persist because they mean something. They ask us to imagine, they ask us to feel, they offer us a mirror, not of facts, but of human longing. To be human is to seek, and to seek is to live not just with what we know, but with what lies just beyond knowing. Perhaps the green children never came from another world. Perhaps the Voynich Manuscript is a clever hoax. Perhaps Atlantis is just a fable, and the pyramids were built by calloused hands and sheer determination alone. But still we wonder. And in that wondering, something soft and sacred awakens. A curiosity, a reverence, a kind of peace. Tonight, as the light fades and your eyes grow heavy, let these mysteries drift gently through your thoughts like falling leaves. Let them settle where they may, not as puzzles to solve, but as stories to hold, fragile, incomplete, beautiful. Because in the end, it is not always the answer that matters most, it is the question.